Hi, and welcome to the Rags to Riches show with myself, Terry Blackburn. Today's guest is a good friend of mine. He's got an impressive bio, to be fair. So, started off in the corporate world as an engineer in quite a large company. He was involved in the floatation of that business and then made a brave move to leave the corporate world and go full-time into property. He's a father of 3 kids, very, very what's the word? Devoted father, I think, from the outside looking in. I think that's fair to say. A bit like myself, so big respect there. Having 3 of them's not easy. He's big into property now, so him and his wife are Capstone Fox. He's Buy-to-Lets, HMOs, now looking at some bigger stuff. You check him out online, I'm sure you'll see that. Developments, conversions as well. Very, very knowledgeable guy. Someone who I hold in quite high regard, knowledge-wise and skill-wise. So welcome to the show, Charlie Sullivan.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Terry. Thanks for inviting me to be on.
No problems at all. Thank you for taking your time out today. Really appreciate it. So what we like to do, Charlie, is on the show, we like to look at your life so far and the experiences that you've had, and we'll hopefully extract as many lessons and learnings from your life and your experiences to hopefully inspire, motivate, and educate other people. So if we looked at your life up until right now, and we partitioned it up into 3 parts. So we looked at the start, being your upbringing and you're getting into the corporate world, starting off your career. The middle part would be the really exciting part and the big things that you achieved around the floatation and property and things. And then the current is obviously where you are now, what your attention is on, what you're looking at going forward. So if we could start by just talking about the start part, really, Charlie, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you first asked me to be on, we discussed at length, didn't we, the fact that I kind of felt a bit of an imposter, really, in the sense of my story is not really one of a rags to riches from a material point of view. If anything, my parents were working class kids who had that story. So they went from, quite humble beginnings, grew businesses and had some great success. So that when I came along, I grew up in a great family home in a nice part of the country in Cheshire. And so I had a lot of opportunities, I would say, early on. I think the thing for me is my story took a bit of a change in direction in my early 20s, but certainly as a kid, I sort of sat in this bracket of like, I wasn't the smartest in class, but I also wasn't one of these who's like, I was terrible and therefore I had to turn to entrepreneurialism. I was almost like, I was all right. I was almost good at lots of things. And in many ways, that was kind of like maybe one of the reasons that I lacked confidence early on. And my mum and dad used to say I was a late bloomer, in the sense that I was quite small and then I grew quite later into school. And I was always okay at most stuff within school, but I never really excelled to the point of standing out above the crowd. But yeah, certainly had a great upbringing, great family unit, good education. And then I went into engineering. So I studied mechanical engineering at Newcastle, really to kind of follow in the footsteps of my father. My dad was an engineer first and foremost, and then he'd gone on to do other things in business. And I guess there was part of me that kind of, I suppose, wanted to follow in his footsteps and see some of the great things he'd done. And I was like, well, I'd like to kind of do that myself. So yeah, it was a good degree, made some great friends, had some good nights at uni up in your hometown, Newcastle.
Every night's a good night in Newcastle, isn't it?
Many of them I can remember, many of them I can't. But yeah, it was a great time to be a student. And then I went on to basically work in engineering up in the Northeast. And as you'll know, the Northeast has got a very rich history in shipbuilding and in the offshore industry. And so I went to work for a local engineering company, designing equipment really for the back deck of ships, and kind of earning my stripes, if you like, as a design engineer. Again, I wasn't terrible, like, I don't think anybody died or anything went wrong from some of my calculations, but I also didn't really excel as an engineer. I kind of sat somewhere in the middle, But really, I've always been personable. I've always had a passion to, build relationships. And so that kind of took me into more of a sales environment. So once I'd done a few years designing, I then moved into sales and business development. And I would say that was kind of a turning point in my career, where I started to realize I had strengths in other areas that actually I was pretty good at. And so I just applied myself there and moved around a few companies. I once heard the phrase, someone said their career path was more career, the verb, than the noun. They sort of bounce from one job to the next. And that's kind of what I did. I was trying to find my fit and my opportunity within a business where I could grow and where there wasn't like a ceiling above me. I was in quite a few roles where there were either other people preferred or it just wasn't happening. So I took some steps to go and join companies that were in quite an early stage. And that's really where my corporate career took off and culminated in floating a business on the London Stock Exchange.
Wow. Okay, just going back a step on the sales thing. What was it about sales? So I'm in sales. I'm proud to say, I'm a salesperson. I think everybody's in sales to some degree. If your partner wants to go to this restaurant, but you end up going to the one that you prefer, you've sold her on that restaurant, right? so everybody's in sales to some degree. But was there anything that you specific about sales that you enjoyed, that you loved, that you just took to? Or
I think, sales has this kind of view of like someone in a blue suit with brown shoes and having all the
coffee breath. Yeah.
And actually I've learned, certainly over my time in the corporate world, that building the relationships, like being able to read a conversation and read a person and find out what's important to them was key. And I would work with people who were more experienced than me, and I would learn from them, and they would remember things about clients, like what school the kids went to, or whether they're into golf or something else. And you don't have to be into those things, but if you can remember little details like that, it really helps to develop and grow a relationship with a potential customer or client. And that kind of taught me that actually you can have the best products in the world and you might sell a few, but if you are someone who's good at building relationships and friendships really with your customers and your clients, you can go a lot further, because ultimately it's all about selling yourself, isn't it? And people want to buy into you as an individual as much as the product or thing that you're selling. So I think early on, I probably tried to pull out a few of the sales tricks and, and sort of try and pick up skills in that sense. But I've sort of learned as time's gone on that actually it's more about people than it is the specific product.
Definitely. People buy people. Couldn't agree more. Do you think a lot of the sales things that you learned back then, you've carried through into negotiating on properties and things? Do you think that put you in good stead for what the bigger stuff that you're doing now?
Yeah, and I don't think I realized at the time, but like offshore engineering well, I knew it was a highly dangerous environment, but it's a hugely technical industry. Like, you're dealing with people's lives on ships out at sea in storms, trying to get oil out the sea. It's not easy. Like, there's a lot that can go wrong. And at the time I just thought, well, it's technical and this is just what you do. But now I'm in another industry. I realized like there's some super clever people in that industry, and actually like the margins and the profits to be made are not really as big as they should be to warrant the level of technical expertise that goes into it. And in contrast, there's other industries, and I think you could say that about property, where you can do a lot better financially with 10% of the technical ability. So I learned, and when I joined Tekmar, who were the company that we took to flotation, I had to sell a product that other companies had. They had a stronger track record than us, they had a better product than us, and they had longer term relationships with clients. And I joined that company in 2014. And then I was in the oil and gas industry, selling into that industry. And the price of oil, literally the month after I joined, the price of oil plummeted from $100 a barrel to $20 a barrel. And that's huge in that industry, because that basically meant like the projects just dried up. So you can be the greatest salesman in the world, but there was no projects to sell to. So I really kind of learned my skills. And I used to say, it's like, my job was like selling ice to the Eskimos, or sand to the Arabs. I'm sorry if that's not very PC, but you get the idea. Like, and if you can do that, and we had success, and took that side of the business from a standing start really to 5 million turnover, over 100 different projects, and we would our sort of gross margin was about 30-40%. When I got into property, I thought, flipping heck, this is easy, compared to what I had to do. And some of the places in the world I had to go to, like Saudi Arabia and places like that to sell. Actually, property is a walk in the park compared to that. So yeah, it was very much a good training ground.
And when did it float in your exited? So you joined 2014, and then how long were you there?
I joined in 2014 as a sales manager. A couple of years in, we'd had some good growth, and I got offered some shares for a very small amount of money, and it was really to try and, I think, keep us in and sell the dream of let's sell to another business. In 2018, we actually floated. In June 2018, we floated. The company was turning over about 25 million, and we floated that business for 65 million pounds sterling. So it was a great success story. It was very much about timing. That small investment I had, and look, I didn't get the lion's share of 65 million, let me just be clear, but it was probably one of the best investments I have ever made in terms of return on investment. And it was great to be part of that as a young management team, to have that success story, and only really have been there sort of 4 or 5 years and been able to make a big contribution. Wow,
it's impressive. Thanks for that, Charlie. Just on that as well, I think it's also an important point you rose towards the end there, was the best return on investment, or one, I think you said one of the best returns on investment you've ever.
Say financially.
Financially. But my point was going to be, a lot of people in our circles and people that we speak to, and the people that, online and stuff, a lot of people think property is the only way and the only ROI that they look at. Businesses, setting up a business or being involved at a senior level of a business can be a much better return than property. I'm certainly not putting down property. I'll always do property, but I think I'll always do business as well, because some of the returns, if you get in at the right stage, if your timing's right, for some of these tech businesses, that the ROI is crazy. I don't think you'd ever get that from property.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. And I think, I'll just say, there's a saying, isn't there? Entrepreneurs work for free. For me, it was never about floating the business. That was an idea that came, a few years in, when we thought, well, why don't we have a go? So I was just passionate. I was enjoying what I was doing. And I think when you get that passion and you do it, the results followed, because we were sort of living and breathing what we were doing and growing that business. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think property it's great fun. It's an adventure. It's a roller coaster. There's ups and downs. But for me, it's part of what I'm doing at the moment. There's a purpose to it. But my passion is to do things wider and further afield that could be in many different industries. And it's never really been about trying to make the biggest return on investment you can on that one particular thing.
So. Love that. Diversifying is key, for sure. Love that, Charlie. Thank you. So if we talked a bit about the start, but sort of moving into the middle part. So why did you make the decision to leave that successful career that you had and go full-time into property? Was the main reason, multiple reasons?
So one of the big, I would say, the turning point was having a young family. So in my 20s, traveled all over the world. It was fine. It's all about you, isn't it? You've not got to think about feeding little hungry mouths or being back at the weekend to do stuff. And then when kids came along, life's perspective changed. Life's about creating those memories and being able to build into my children in the same way that my parents built into me. It has become a bigger and bigger factor in my life. And so I wanted to dedicate more time to that, not less. And there was just a few things, I missed my daughter's first steps. I mean, I could have missed them if I was in the country, but I happened to be traveling on business. So I got a video, over FaceTime. I was in Malaysia the day before my son was born. I had to fly back middle of the night to get back in time. Thankfully I did. But these were just things I'm potentially missing life like once in a lifetime moments because I'm trying to close a deal in Singapore or in Houston. And so, you know, the job was phenomenal. Like it was great. It was a dream job in many ways, but I always had this itch, this entrepreneurial itch, you know, watching my father as I was growing up. He created businesses for fun and just loved it. He had such a up and down life, you know, he'd make loads of money, lose it all, make more. And it was like, he just had that gene in him, you know? And so I always had this thing of like, I want to do that. And it just so happened that when kids came along, I think that was the push. And really, when I look at it, it's like, I sort of had more to lose at that point. So really, I should have done it a lot sooner, but it was the urgency to say, let's create a life that we don't have to turn up 9 o'clock, go home at 5, live for the weekend. Let's create a life where we can be parents, business owners, and have that flexibility.
Love that. It's a really powerful point there. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know I certainly can. I set up the main business that I'm involved in, you know, I think it was 6 months before Ali was born. And, you know, it is, when you miss stuff, it does get to you a little bit, doesn't it? You're stuck between, I love my career and I want to make money and achieve big things, but you've also got to, you know, you've got to be there for your kids, haven't you? I think too many people chase money and the lose things, don't they? You know, the sacrifice relationships or being a parent or friendships just for the sake of money, when I think some people don't, unfortunately, they only realize this when they're a bit older than us. I think some people don't. That's a fair play to you. It's a brave move, and it's an honourable thing. It is a father, isn't it? I think it's a really great thing you've done there. But how old are the kids now? Because you've got your hands full, haven't you?
I've got my hands full, yeah. So we've got a 6-year-old, we've got a 3-year-old, and we've got a little lockdown 1-year-old. She was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, but we're done at 3. So 2
I was going to say, is that you done now?
That's me done, yeah. Two girls and one in the mid and a boy in the middle. And it's crazy, it's chaotic, it's stressful. You know what it's all about. But some of my most heartwarming moments, obviously, with my kids and my family. And and as I get a bit older, realize that that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Definitely. There's a great book. I've actually been recommended this book. I haven't actually read it, so I'm saying it's great. Multiple people have told us that it's great, and it's really relevant to what you just said, which is why I'll bring it up. It's called The 7 Regrets of the Dying. And what my good friend told us it's about anyway is they interviewed loads of people. It's quite a morbid book, I suppose, but they interviewed loads of people who were in a hospice and they were due to die. And, you know, there was things like, I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I, you know, didn't ruin that relationship or whatever it may be. There's none of them say, I wish I worked more. And I think that's really powerful. When you get to that stage in your life, you're not going to regret. You might regret maybe he's not taking a chance or setting up a business, but you won't think, I wish I worked 12-hour days instead of 8. You know, you won't, but you will regret not doing stuff for your family. So I can really relate to what you're saying. I think
the thing that hangs over my head is I don't think anyone's ever looked back on their life and said, I wish I'd spent less time with my kids.
Exactly.
And, you know, there are times like now I'm at home, like my kids, you know, they might come in a minute. They don't see boundaries and doors and things, right? But like sometimes it's a bit intense, and I'm like, I quite like my little 3-day trip to Dubai and get a good night's sleep and a steak dinner. But yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. And we have to remind ourselves, like these moments go so quick, don't they? And before long, I mean, we're saying now, like, could just do with a bit of a break from them every now and then. But before long, we'll be wishing they won't be wanting to come home.
Well, yeah, exactly. They won't want to know us.
Exactly. So, you know, while they are relatively friendly towards us now, we'll lap it up. Yeah.
Love that. Thanks, Charlie. So let's talk a little bit about property. So, how did you first get into property? How did that start, and where you're sort of at now with it?
Yeah, so, and it kind of ties into the family thing because and death, really, you know, just to talk about that for a little bit. The first seed for me that was sown in property was through my dad. My dad was a property investor and developer in like the 80s and 90s, and then he moved back into his first love, engineering. But
was he sorry to interrupt there, Charlie, was he, what scale was he doing property, do you know? Was he quite big?
he was building small developments like blocks of flats and houses around Cheshire, and and so, you know, not on a huge scale. And I think in the end, I think he packed it in because I think he just got a bit sick of the building side of it, you know, materials going missing on site, like, you know, dealing with trades and all of that, you know, that fun stuff. But when I was 21, me and my best mate were living together, and we were talking about, you know, let's become billionaires before we're 30, what we're going to do. And we were like, right, let's buy an end terrace in Bradford, because he's from Bradford, and we'll turn the downstairs into a shop and the upstairs into a flat. Like, I was like, great idea. Let's write to the only person we knew who knew anything about property, which was my dad at the time. And basically wrote to my dad, just said, what do you think of this idea? Me and Rory think it could be a good way to, you know, make a bit of money. And my dad wrote back to me like an email, proper business like, you know, but it was like a father's letter to a son. He was like, right, son, property is a great route to wealth. You make your money when you buy. You need your little black book of trades. Don't be paying architects a percentage, pay them a fixed fee. You know, there's all these little golden nuggets that at the time I was like, wow, this is good, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And so I kept that. And that was basically the last thing I ever had in writing from my dad. 3 days later, he was in a helicopter crash and basically died on impact. And so that was the very last thing that I had that was kind of his sort of letter to me. And at his funeral, my friend Rory just said, keep hold of that, because one day that'll be a blueprint for you to build a property business. And so, you know, like having a death so close to me in my early 20s obviously had a big impact. And you sort of have two choices at that point. You know, you kind of wallow and sort of woe is me and go down a path of sort of self-pity and things like that, or you can sort of try and look at it another way and say, you know, what would your dad want, and how can you live out a legacy that would make him proud, you know, and draw on all the privileges I had up to that point. Because I think I was 23 actually, I think at the time. But you know, I chose to look at it as I'm grateful for the years I did have with him, you know, and yes, I'd love to have him as a business mentor going forwards, but life happens and things will happen in your life that you don't have control over. And that was one of those things. So that then took me on a process. And I realized this is a long-winded way of answering how I got into property. That then took me over the next 5-10 years of going and finding advice and support from really like father figures in business. And I wasn't shy, you know, I asked direct questions because I didn't have my dad. I couldn't go to him anymore. So I decided to go to people I respected within business. And then when kids came along, thought, right, property, dig out the old blueprint and let's see what we can do. And so long story shorter, I then read books, podcasts, went and did a few courses, and got myself a coach and a mentor, somebody who could help take us on that next step. So that's it. And then really we started investing kind of sort of 2017 time. That was when we really kicked on with our investing.
Pushed on. I'm sure, just to go back a step as well, I'm sure you would be proud as well, Charlie. Like, I don't know you that well, but great dad, great, you know, very, very knowledgeable in property and obviously successful in property and business. So I'm sure you would, mate. So on the property side, Buy-to-Lets, HMOs, has your strategy changed? Do you love one strategy more than another? Where you sort of at with property?
Yeah. So again, there was a purpose to why we did property initially. Initially, it was let's replace our income from the corporate world. And even before getting to that, we were like, let's just get to £2,000 a month, you know, cover the bases, mortgage bills, like basic outgoings. So we were living up in the northeast, as you know, is pretty decent investment area. And so we looked into buy-to-lets first, kind of start with something that was lower risk, lower return, but we could really cut our teeth on. And then we moved on to HMOs, smaller HMOs. I mean, the biggest HMOs we do is up to 6 bed, don't really go above that. And we quite like keeping it at that. So for a few years, we invested in that strategy. Buy-to-Lets HMOs just kept going. And then in recent times, we've moved more into the commercial conversion space, and also land development is something that we've got running at the moment. So when I say commercial conversions, larger buildings, like we've got a grade 2 listed chapel in North Wales, and also a pub up in the northeast that we're converting into multiple apartments. So the chapel's going to be 7 apartments, the pub's going to be 12 apartments. And really it was about focusing, I guess, more effort on fewer projects and testing myself a little bit, because I always wanted to do something a little bit bigger. And so, yeah, we've got those running through at the moment. But that's
Nice.
kind of where we're up to today.
Nice. Sounds good. Some exciting stuff. And Charlie will see it towards the end where to find him and stuff, but look at the stuff he's doing online. There's some very active on socials on you. I think he must be one of the funniest property people on Instagram. I know I see that too. He's good crack on social media, but sounds like it's some exciting stuff going on. Sounds good. What do you prefer though? Do you prefer the challenging stuff? Because I know we spoke about planning a bit, and I think that's challenging. Do you prefer the more complex stuff, or do you prefer the easier stuff, or do you just do stuff that you're challenging yourself, or what
I like doing deals, going back to the sales side of thing. I like the chase, the hunt, go for the kill, and then
negotiation.
I just thrive off that. So if I smell an opportunity or I see something, I just kick into like overdrive, and I really want to close the deal. And whether that's a learned behavior or whether that's something that's kind of ingrained within me, DNA similar to my dad, I don't know, but that's what I buzz off. So once the deal's done, I'm sort of mentally, I've already developed it. Sometimes forget you've still got that bit to do. But so I would say I like that side of it, whether it's a buy-to-let or a HMO or a commercial conversion. That's the bit that really kind of I thrive off. Practically, what I found in the last few years, things that you can't control, like the planning process, incredibly frustrating. Feel sort of shackled, not being able to push things through as quickly as we'd like. However, they are bigger projects, so there's a bigger reward at the end. So I think the kind of jury's still out. I think my wife would say the buy-to-lets, because you can just rack them up, can't you? Just keep buying, simple and repeatable. But there's this itch in me to kind of try something new and do something a bit different. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does. It does. No, it's just interesting. I'm asking a lot of the property people on the show about that, because I think one of the problems with property, it is a positive as well, but one of the problems is there's that many different strategies, and there's that many different people talking about these different strategies. I think some people listen to too many people, and then what that does is it clouds the judgment, and then they don't end up doing anything. But you started off buy-to-lets, right? Then HMOs, then the bigger stuff. Is that kind of your sort of?
So we were very, like, I will openly admit I was very scattergun early on. I tried to do a lease option on a care home that the Church of Scientology owned, and it got so ridiculous. I went and had a pint at the pub next door because I thought I'd get information from the landlord, and in my head it was an amazing idea. And eventually someone sort of sat us down and went, "You're all over the place. What are you doing? You're trying to like do lease options, and you're just seeing every strategy and trying to go for it." And that was when it came down to how much money per month. What's the purpose of you doing this?
Exactly.
Is it number of houses? Is it amount of money per month? And for us, it was, we need to get to a figure per month. And you can break that down into how many buy-to-lets do you need and how many HMOs. Right, you need 4 buy-to-lets bringing in $250 a month and 1 HMO at $1,000. You need 5 houses, go find them. Forget care homes, forget anything else, just ignore all of them and focus on that. And once we did that, we really started to motor, and that's where we really got traction and momentum.
Simplicity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Simple goals, breaking it down. Love that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Charlie. I think that's great advice for a lot of people. There will definitely be people listening to this who either start on from property, or they're looking at the bigger stuff without, learning to walk before they can run type thing. I think that's great advice. Thanks, Charlie. So talk a little bit about where we are now. Going forward, is that where your attention is? Is it all the bigger stuff, or I think you still just recently bought a buy-to-let though, didn't you?
Yeah, so in the immediate future, we've got these larger development projects to build out. So they've both been bought, the pub and the hotel, or sorry, the church and the pub slash hotel slash whatever you want to call it. It's a big old lump of a building.
Lump it is, yeah.
Not trying to claim I'm some sort of hotelier, just what it's called, the Beeswing Hotel. So we've got those to build out. And then the church, we're going to sell those apartments, and with the Beeswing, with the pub, we're going to retain them. But yeah, we've also got HMO going through and did a buy-to-let recently.
Nice.
And I've got my own house and family, we're doing work there. So really this year's about kind of being quite disciplined to deliver what we've done. And then I think I'll look ahead in the next year whether I want to do something different. I've got a passion for property. I enjoy it, but I've got a bigger passion to sort of use the skills I've learned within property to try and do some really good things. I think that's one characteristic I noticed in my dad is he was quite, he was a different kind of character and personality. He wasn't big and loud. He was sort of a behind the scenes guy, but he would help a lot of people that you wouldn't see it unless you knew him, but he would use his business skills to kind of fight the corner for like friends and people in the community. And that's something I always admired, is that you can take your skills and your talents and apply them to help maybe a charity or an organization that perhaps needs those skills. I get a big sort of kick out of that. I don't know if that's a positive thing,
Yeah, no, I think giving back something that, well, you hear about people doing it, but I'm sure there's still a lot of people who are very wealthy and very successful who don't give back. And and there's only so much money that you can have.
I feel like happiest when I give. I know that might sound really weird, but I think it's very rewarding to be able to impart something that's cost you to somebody else. And I just I really believe like the world of the generous grows larger and larger. I don't know if you've ever heard that. And I think when we start becoming quite insular and closed off and like me, and when it all becomes about you as an individual and what you can build your empire on, then I sort of feel like you don't have as rewarding a life. So sure. That's something I try and remind myself of.
Love that. If only everybody thought like that, I think the world will be a very, very different place.
Yeah, I agree. I think love that. Strange times that we live in. But,
definitely. I love that. Thanks, Charlie. So what advice, is a very generic question, but maybe he's breaking it into two questions. And actually, what advice would you give to people just starting off in property? First question. In terms of strategizing and just some general tips, because you're very experienced and knowledgeable. What advice would you give to people starting off?
I think the biggest thing is to take your time getting your initial plan right. And what I mean by that is quite often people are inspired by what they see online, social media and other people's accounts, but they're almost seeing the tail end of years and years of being invisible and unknown, like putting the work in and building the foundations. And that was certainly us. Like we're by no means have a large following online, but we get nice comments and we get messages from people who kind of want to do what we're doing, but they've maybe not seen the sacrifices and the stress and the work that's gone in over the last 5-10 years. So take your time. What I would say is like, look at your circumstances and what you want to achieve in the next 12 months, 24 months, and then align a plan and work with somebody who can help you get to that point. And you almost have to block out all the other noise, because like you said already, if you just start looking at what someone's doing over there or what someone's doing over there, you just get analysis paralysis and you'll just become a busy fool, like running around all over the place, committing a lot of time to very little, so you're better off kind of looking at, get a plan, have a look at it, break it down and be very disciplined about executing that plan with somebody who's experienced, who can help you and help you avoid a lot of the pitfalls. And so that would be my sort of one piece of advice, particularly for people starting out in property.
Love that. That's great advice. And it's the simple things, isn't it? It's some of the simplest things that people don't do, right? Making a goal list, action points and action steps that you need to do to get that goal.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. Like my dad used to write business plans on napkins. You know, I do it now. You know, you'll probably get it next time I'm up in Newcastle. We'll go out for lunch and just get a napkin out and a pen and start writing. Honestly, the best plans are written on back of a fag packet or a napkin if you don't smoke.
Definitely. Definitely, man. Love that. And what advice would you give to somebody maybe who's bought a few properties, more handful of properties, 5, 10, whatever properties, and maybe they're looking, because I know some people in this sport, you see, so I know some people where they've got some property, you know, 4 or 5 properties. Some of the lads do work for me and they're lacking a little bit of motivation. Then maybe he's done 4 or 5 Buy-to-Lets. It's like same old, same old. Then maybe it's the people that they're in their circle aren't achieving very much. So that, you know, they think they're the man, they think they're doing really well. Like the comfort zone almost is what I'm getting to. You know, how do you, because you seem to have changed your levels and your standards and what you want to quite a few times, leaving the corporate world to placing your income to moving to HMOs and the bigger stuff. What's your advice for those type people who maybe want to take things next level?
I think getting comfortable is kind of one of the most dangerous things, because you just sort of tread water and, you know, not just sort of sail along in life without much purpose or direction, you know. And so for us, when I look at like the key milestones in the last 10 years, it's been times where I've either got really irritated about something, you know, to the point of frustration of like, I need to do something about this, or there's been a massive sort of move because of like something like kids, you know, which is huge. That's a real heart thing, isn't it, to do. So I would say to those people who are maybe feeling a little bit flat, a little bit lethargic, you know, you maybe need to take yourself out of that environment that you're in and get around people that are going to spark you into having ideas of something you can get passionate about. Because I just think, like, when you get passionate about something, it's almost, you can have a bad night's sleep and you'll still wake up the next day and smash out 12 hours, you know, like working on that thing, because you're alive, you know, and you're motivated. And I think that rubs off on other people as well. So if you're in that position, firstly, identify you're in that position. That's all right. You know, like you get to that point and go, okay, maybe I need to do something, but then change your environment to try and get you that little spark. I mean, you can use loads of analogies, can't you? It's like the gym. If you just sat on the sofa, you've kind of like, you're just going to sit there all the time. But if you get yourself out in an environment with people who like to keep fit, they're going to encourage you and inspire you to want to do that. And so you're going to start going to the gym and finding it a bit easier. So I think it's the same in business. Change your environment. And I definitely think there's been times I've got comfortable, and then I get this little voice in my head, you know, it's like the little devil and angel on your shoulder. And it's like, come on, Charlie, it's time for a change. And sometimes that's counterculture, and sometimes it's against the advice of people that love you the most, like your family and friends, who might not have that same mentality as you. And they might be trying to give you advice out of loving you, but they don't realize that actually for you to fulfill your potential and you know, really kind of develop those business ideas, you've got to think a bit differently and you've got to take a few risks. So, you know, you've kind of got yourself around people that are going to, you need to get yourself around people that are going to tell you to go for it and not try and hold you back.
Love that. Again, that's great advice. You know, I'm not sure who says the quote. I think it's Grant Cardone or someone. Maybe he says, like, you know, someone who's achieving more than you or doing more than you in a particular area or field, they'll never tell you to slow down. They'll never tell you to, you know, stop doing all that. You're thinking too big. It's only the people who are doing less than you that ever say that. And I know sometimes family and friends are being cautious and telling you not to take the risks from a point of caring. But, you know, the chat, the conversations are so much different when you speak to people who are achieving more than you've achieved in that particular field on.
And that's really the tell, isn't it? Like poker, there's a tell, there's an indication. And if you are in an environment where you're getting that quite a lot of like, maybe you should slow down, maybe you should do this or that, that's probably telling you, you know, it's time to step up and do something different.
Love that.
So go for it. Yeah,
man. Love that. Thanks, Charlie. Last question is, the show is called the Rags to Riches Show. So what does being rich mean to you? Because you can be rich in time, friendships, relationships, monetary terms, loads of different things. But what does being rich mean to you?
So, yeah, I think to me, as I mentioned, by by many measures, my upbringing and how I've got to where I am today, you know, and private education, went to university and things, you know, in many eyes, that's a rich upbringing. So, you know, I'm very conscious. I don't have I grew up with nothing and I've ended up with everything. That's not my story. I think I've certainly had a process of having a few big impactful changes in my life through losing my dad and some other things that have gone on that have maybe taken me to a place of emotional rags to then build that up. But I think rich to me is about living a life rich in experiences, rich in generosity, in showing love to other people. And I know that might sound a bit wishy-washy and emotional, but like at the end of the day, we've only got one life, you know, and life is short. And I don't want to be known for like the stuff you have, or, you know, in that sense, I want to be somebody that cares about other people, that's a great dad and to my kids and husband to my wife, and that is somebody that will go above and beyond to help others and to try and live out my full potential. And that's what I'd say.
Love that. It's one of my favorite answers so far, I think. Love that. Love
Thank
that. Enriching experiences as well is something that nobody's mentioned. Because you can be if you've traveled the world and you've done all these exciting things, even things with your family in the local area, just doing nice things. You know, some of these things that money can't buy, can they? I know that's a really cliche thing to say as well, but some of these experiences money cannot buy. That's a really great answer, and I think I've really enjoyed this interview. I think great. You're a great guy, Charlie, and I think if anyone wants to contact you, if anyone wants to follow what you're doing, what's the sort of best way?
Yeah, so we're on social media channels. You can, you know, find me personally on places like LinkedIn, Charlie Sullivan, or in terms of the property business, it's Capstone Fox Properties. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. And yeah, give us a follow on there. And if you've got any questions or any feedback, you know, send us a message and I'll do my best to respond.
Love that. Just one last thing, actually. Why Capstone Fox? What does that mean?
So we wanted to create a name that was quite unique. You know, there's a lot of property business names out there, and we wanted it to kind of be a nod to both of our families. So my wife, Jeeling, her family, her dad was a roofer up in Newcastle.
God's country, yeah.
In God's country. And his company was called Capstone Roofing, you know, the capstone being symbolic of the really important part of the building that kind of provides integrity and strength. So, you know, it symbolizes trust and stability. And we like that. It was like a building term we could put in the name. And the Fox came from my father, my side of the family. My dad's property company was called Tony Sullivan Developments, but he had a logo, which was a fox. And he mentions this logo in the letter that he wrote to me all those years ago. And he said, Charlie, a fox is a great symbol for a property business. And he said, because a fox will wait all night for the toad to come out of the hole before it strikes. And that's the patience, cunning, and timing that you need to be successful in property. Wow. And so we put that in the name. And yeah, and I keep seeing foxes all over the place now. And every time I do, I think you need to be more cunning.
I didn't actually know that. That's great, that name. I was expecting something like, I like foxes or something weird like that, you know.
Yeah.
But love that. It's got meaning, it's got purpose, and yeah, foxes do that, don't they? And it's so relevant to property, isn't it? Waiting for the right deal, not jumping in. Yeah.
And sometimes you got to be a bit of a pest.
Yeah. Best than their agents.
Risk getting shot by the farmer, but back on.
Love that, man. Charlie, thank you so much.
Right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, buddy. Cheers.
Take care.